Good afternoon. On behalf of Engineers Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you all to our Thought Leaders series, How Important is BIM for General Contractors? My name is Amanda and I'll be your moderator today. Firstly, in keeping with our tradition, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that today's webinar is being hosted with Engineers Australia's industry partner, Webster. Webster is created by Visualise SA with headquarters in Lausanne, Switzerland, and began developing real-time issue tracking software for the AEC industry in 2008. The primary focus of Webster is to provide a BIM collaboration platform for 3D and 2D workflows that enables users to work and communicate with all project stakeholders in a unified software environment. Currently, more than 100,000 AEC professionals in 150 countries rely on Webster every day as a project coordination tool on thousands of construction projects of all types. Webster brings powerful 3D gaming technology and cloud solutions to solve real-world problems in architecture, engineering, construction, and facility management. Bridging the gap between design and build, Webster helps users collaborate more efficiently, greatly speeding up the project cycle, and as a result, bringing to life more sustainable projects. Today, we will hear from our keynote speaker, followed by a panel discussion and audience Q&A. And I encourage you to send questions through to our speakers via the YouTube chat. I'd now like to welcome our moderator, Ross Harvey. As WSP's Director of Structures for the New South Wales region, Ross brings a practical approach to leading and inspiring teams for the delivery of holistic discipline on complex building projects. Ross is a technically strong creative thinker who is advocating innovation through all aspects of the business, including in his role as a WSP's digital lead for civil and structural engineering in Australia. Ross has developed engineering solutions for several complex buildings, and his work includes projects with major private and public sector clients, including ICD, Oxford University, Land Securities, Brookfield Multiplex, and Lipton Rogers. Please welcome Ross Harvey.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome again to our viewers. I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker today, Vlad Milicevic. Vlad has been working in software as a service for design, construction, and facility management for over 13 years. He has been consulting on information and document management, facility management systems, and BIM on many projects spanning the Middle East and Australia and New Zealand regions. Vlad is currently an APAC director for Webster, as well as visiting lecturer at Deakin University and Melbourne University, delivering lectures on technology, information, and BIM. Please welcome Vlad Milicevic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vlad Milicevic. I'm the director for APAC for Webster, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to address some of the things that we're going to be discussing here today on this panel. It's probably an understatement that we live in challenging times. And when we transfer that to the construction industry, the times are not getting any easier for the whole kind of project community and roles that are working on any given project, on any given vertical. But I guess with the latest, especially the last couple of years, there's more and more strains on managing contractors and contractors in general. Things caused obviously by the outbreak of coronavirus, which hopefully we're kind of starting to see the end of, that caused in an industry where the margins are traditionally quite thin, caused further problems, supply chain problems, and then coming out of that, rising cost of materials, and so on and so forth. it's now really becoming possibly more important than ever to sit down and look into each and every efficiency that a contractor can get on any given project. So today we're going to be discussing around BIM, and we have quite a few awesome individuals from the industry that can share their own experiences. But if we talk about building information modeling and where are those efficiencies that a project and a contractor can get out of that methodology, obviously there's been many studies, many projects, and many papers written on all of that. One probably thing that comes to mind straight away when someone says BIM, it's 3D and 3D modeling, which is obviously one very big, very important part of it. But I always like to say that it's the central eye that's really the most important piece, the information, building information modeling. BIM is a methodology that really allows everyone to get to the next level with creation and exchange and validation of information, regardless of what that information is, be it 3D graphical information, 2D information that comes up with together with 3D models, 2D drawings, and so on and so forth, all together form part of that building information modeling efficiencies. So just to give some examples from my experience supporting and talking to a lot of different companies across a few different regions globally in the last 15 years. Example here in Australia from a couple of years ago. Obviously can't reveal the client's name or any project or anything like that, but it's a true story, trust me on that one. Basically, I was discussing this with a client who worked on a big infrastructure project, who told me that the project team uncovered a potential issue on that project thanks to technology, thanks to the point cloud scanning, and thanks to BIM collaboration tools such as Revista, for example. An issue that when I asked him how much would it have cost the project additional, if not to mention delays, obviously, but just in money, if that hadn't been discovered while it was still in your building information model, but rather while building on site, he's off the top of his head, his estimate was $500,000, and he said that's a very optimistic estimate. So could have easily been even way more than that, and that's just one example of how BIM and the technologies that are used to deploy the BIM methodology can assist with those margins and those efficiencies. Again, in today's world, really, contractors need all the help they can get to stay solvent. And as we've seen with a couple of unfortunate recent examples, it is a jungle out there, and it is a struggle. So really, it's about I think, in my opinion, one big piece around building information modeling is that it's not anymore in 2022 that difficult for anyone to see there are big gains with deploying the methodology, but it's about probably figuring out this industry altogether. It's about that fear of change that's very real in many examples, because it's not just about the innate human fear of change of, well, we've done things like this for decades and now we want to do things slightly differently to make them efficient. It's also the realities of projects where contractors are tasked with delivering a project and they don't really have much room to deploy new methodologies and new technologies, because that does take certain time. Once you develop that change and it's business as usual, the efficiencies kick in, and that's not a problem. But it's about finding the right projects that are open enough to and have flexibility enough to kind of start off that change, if that makes sense. So that's maybe something that we can discuss today as well. So those are just a few of my philosophical thoughts on BIM change and the current state of the industry, and especially the managing contractor role. Before we go ahead with a much more beneficial and interesting part of this whole panel with our industry experts, I just wanted to add that one thing that we realized very early on in Revisto is that for this change to happen, the industry, and especially the guys that traditionally are seen as someone that doesn't really get involved with 3D modeling or 3D models at all, which is your contractors on site and people that actually need to build a particular asset. As I was saying, we very early on realized that there's a few very important factors when it comes to change and adoption of new methodologies and new technologies, and that's extreme accountability of a particular software package that's there to support a particular business process that, again, in this BIM world is likely a change from how things have been done before, and the extreme user friendliness of that platform. So basically, being able to allow people to have as smoothless change as possible compared to their daily lives and their working lives and what they're used to be doing. That's why we early on realized that mixing up 2D and 3D components is very, very essential, so that people can still look at 2D, but very easily get to the 3D world without having to go through a 20, 30-hour course just to be able to navigate through a 3D model. And also the fact that people on site have to know that apart from just having a software package that's easy to use, they can count on it. So regardless of whether the internet connection is down, whether you're in the basement and you don't have an internet connection, or you're somewhere off the beaten track and the internet connection is either patchy or non-existent, you still need to be able to access the tools that support the BIM process so that you know that you can trust it and count on it to ultimately gain that traction and adoption from everyone. And I think that's another crucial word that BIM technological change and process has been traditionally a little bit siloed in a way that it was restricted to BIM managers, modelers, and so on and so forth. And the bigger part of the project team hasn't been able to benefit too much out of it. That's why now with our integrated collaboration platform Revisto, we also introduced a clash automation module that ultimately allows BIM managers to easily run clashes, but also very easily develop a process where it's all shared with everyone who needs to be part of that process, something that traditionally wasn't the easiest thing to do. So that you can very easily ping someone who's going to be building a certain asset and talk about constructability of certain things. And they can even be on site, look at their iPad and comment back to you with it. So pretty much an unprecedented way to connect people and get everyone into that BIM digital engineering fold, if that makes sense. So having said all that, I'm going to shut up now and transfer the spotlight onto the industry experts we have today on this panel. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for your insights, Vlad. I would now like to welcome our panel for today's discussion, starting off with Eloise Robinson. Eloise is a digital engineering manager and civil engineer with over 10 years' experience in the infrastructure industry. Eloise's career has included working in both the public and private sectors on a number of world-renowned engineering projects. As a leader in the digital engineering team in Arcadis, Eloise has been responsible for helping transform the business through a program of digital innovation, standardization, and automation developments. This work has created a new standard for business as usual, which places digital engineering at the center of Arcadis' work. I'd like to welcome our second panelist, Sean Webster. Sean joined Laing O'Rourke in 2018 and is currently the principal digital engineer managing the team for the Sydney Metro project. He is responsible for delivering on Sydney Metro digital engineering requirements and implementing a consistent standard of digital and information management to drive productivity and digital enablement. Before joining Laing O'Rourke, Sean has worked on the client side at Transport for London as part of the core BIM team, delivering digital framework and the first iteration of the common data environment to projects and programs. I'd also like to welcome our third panelist, Alex Wong. Alex is a member of the digital engineering team for McConnell Dowell. In his current role as senior digital engineer, Alex is responsible for promoting McConnell Dowell digital engineering and as the employer of choice to attract the best possible talent to the business. Our fourth and final panelist is Christian Pelaria. Christian is experienced in managing big projects from both an architectural and engineering point of view. He held the position of team leader, design manager, and project manager, BIM manager, and DE lead roles in infrastructure area since 2014 up until the present. Christian has worked in the infrastructure field across the last 10 years in many countries such as Chile, Peru, Mexico, and Argentina, to name a few, leading big projects from both design and BIM, developing and moved to Australia, joining AECOM only a year ago. Chris is passionate about programming and visual programming, aiming to create innovative workflows able to speed up processes in BIM and BIM model in production, breaking the barriers of software for complex models. Well, thank you very much for joining us all. Our panelists will now come together to take questions. And during this time, we'll be taking the questions from our audience. And if you'd like to submit a question, please do so via the chat box. Please ensure that you provide your name and who is asking the question. So, kicking off with the first question. What were the factors that made your organization decide to embark on a digital transformation journey? And I think this is an open question to the panelists here, but I think I would start with Eloise to kick it off.
Thanks, Russ. Good question. So in 2017, Arcadis committed globally to 100% BIM. And it makes sense when you think about the type of work that we do. So as a design consultancy, what we deliver on projects is information, whether that's models, drawings, data, or document. BIM is a better way to manage that information. So what that's allowed us to do is have common data environments that allow our global teams to all work together on the same project. Federated models allow us to review and analyze our designs in greater detail. And the DE management plans and staff mean that our greater team is more successful in delivering their projects. So BIM just makes sense, which is why we made that commitment and we've transformed the way we work.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I was wondering whether from a contractor side, Sean, you've seen benefits in this and what made your organization embark on the digital transformation?
Yeah, sure. So actually, this actually drives right from the top from our company. So it's actually originally came from Ray O'Rourke back in the UK for the digital, the vertical supply chain. So what we do is actually in the UK, so both in the UK and Australia, it's very heavy in both hubs. But really, it came from an original thought process around actually doing that full digital supply chain and vertical space. So it starts from the very start of the project in the design phase, and we go right through our full vertical supply chain. So right through from design into prefabrication and manufacturing and our different sort of processes we have in the UK. and then into the actual supply chain as well, both for like actually site compounds, so with our select division and stuff like that, and also with plant and equipment as well, so they're actually tracking that whole process, and then right through to the handover back to the client. So for us there, we actually see that it's actually a bigger picture, not just for our benefit. So we know what we're going to go to work, how we're going to construct it through the design phase, so doing that methodology and then actually then building it. But it also brings along our stakeholders, so our clients along with that, so they can see the full picture about what we're going to do for them during the process, both during the tender phase and also the delivery phase. But also then actually the other stakeholders. So you're talking about like, say, councils, for example. We're doing work now in Melbourne on the SRL project and stuff like that. And you sort of think about how do you get these other sort of stakeholders involved in that process? How do you get there and show them what we're going to do to their assets, and what they're going to do with their environment? So if you really think about council and stuff like that, how are we going to make sure we're not impacting the urban environment in a way that's going to disrupt people in that environment, stuff like that. So it's very key about how you express that. So if you're talking about that whole sort of digital process and information management process, that's where it's really important for us across that whole process.
Yeah, it's interesting point. I was wondering, Christian, the same sort of question to yourself. From what are the factors that your organisation has had, and why have you embarked on this?
Yeah, actually, I can't really talk about AECOM because I just joined AECOM 1 year ago, and everything was already done. But I can definitely bring my experience in my previous company, which is an Italian company, and we were working for infrastructure design, in particular for tunneling, and it was a really early stage for Bim. It was 2012, in which we got a new project, a new job in South America. It was a metro line for Lima in Peru, and yeah, Bim was something that nobody knows at the moment. Nobody knew at that moment, and we decided to do all the stations for that line in Revit, in particular with Revit software. And that was the first experience in which the company could really taste the powerful of the technology. I wouldn't say the software. I wouldn't say the technology. So if until that moment we had to just grab our plan, our sections, our elevations, and just create our 3D. So we were not in the point in which we were putting too many information like now. We were in the point in which the beauty of being were just having the model, having the 3D, having the every kind of drawing, and also a take of material. So you could also even have a bill of quantity, realize it in a few days, just without too many efforts. And that was the first experience. So after that, we decided to go toward that direction. But the big one was after that project. There was another one in which we started to use Beam in a more, I would say, proper way, using that with work sharing. So sharing the model with other disciplines. So having the structure, architecture, MEP project, everything in one unique, I wouldn't say one unique model, but in one unique platform. So we were able really to say, okay, we are using Beam, and we are finding issues before the delivery, and that was really good. And there was I can just bring an example. We were delivering in 1 week. We had to deliver all the project in 1 week, and we discovered that the structure guys just make a beam higher because they had to make it higher, and the architecture model wasn't work probably because that high was too much, and the minimum high for architecture was low, and that kind of issue just were raised up in a moment, and we were able to fix everything in time. And that, I think, it wouldn't have been possible to do that with a normal and traditional CAD, unless you had a really good coordination. But that's also need a big effort in coordination. So you need to put a person that is just overlapping all the drawings or the plans, and that's something that we really didn't know. We really didn't do before, and that's what was, I would say, the first. Exactly, this was the project that was the game changer for us.
Thank you, Christian.
No worries.
And I'm sure all of the firms on this call have seen great benefits to their firms and have faced the challenges. And I was wondering, Alex, to get to the success you have today, what challenges did you face in your taking up of the digital transformation?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, our challenges would be the what does it mean, the meaning of BIM to everybody. So we've had to sort of gone through a round of education, start from a small education session about what BIM is really about. So to fill that gap in, so one thing that I probably didn't sell is I've been with the company for 20 years, seeing the digital transformation of the journey from start to an end. So when we first started this journey 20 years ago, when I first started joining the company, we still using phone, fax. In one occasion, I've been asked to release a pigeon just to send a message across the building. I'm just kidding on that one. So you would imagine I come from a pipeline background, and in a sense, BIM or digital engineering is really the norm in the oil and gas industry. So it was just a natural progression for me. But for a lot of people, quite often they'll question about BIM. What does that mean? How does it help them? So the challenges is to make them aware you have tools that's available to help them. So the key challenges is to identify the right tool for the people to use. So fast forward that 17 years later, when I first met Vlad, I discovered this new, very fancy tool that we can get on the, which is a famous Webster that everyone's talking about today. It's a tool that we're using day in, day out. When we first started the journey, it has its challenges, hardware challenges, people's too scared to use them. And also from a contractor perspective, like everyone else, when we first started the construction journey, the first thing that we think is race to the finish line. How are we going to race to the finish line in the shortest time and with the minimum amount of money to spend? So the challenges we have over there is, right, we got all these beautiful informations. You started off, you have PDF, you have all these different kind of file format. How do you put it all together? How do you put it in one picture, in my opinion? So when I first started 20 years ago, we quite often PowerPoint or Excel used to be the king of trying to put everything together. Then you got Google Earth, you got Nearmap, all these different kind of technology coming along. So the challenges that I can see for ourselves is, what is the right technology that we're going to deploy? Because you can have a very, very, very good software package and can do all sorts of things that you want. But then at the end of the day, everyone just go, no, I'm just going to go back to my paper. It's too complicated, too costly, that sort of thing. So finding the right balance and when to put out the information, what sort of information to put out, and quite a lot of time is find something that is really relatable by their day to days. So every day when you're doing, the first thing that you open up today is, yep, I'm going to open my Outlook. So as time progresses, every day that when I wake up, the first thing I do is I'm going to check on my social media on my phone. So having the right kind of technology, and also another thing is balance between the right technology, between getting to the right people. People have different understanding of technology for different projects. So one of the projects we are doing at the moment in the Cornerdale is the level crossing removing, where you have several projects running all at the same time, and each project have their own, you would say, level of expertise in terms of delivering their job. And you got people come and go all the time. You got people from different ethnicity, different understanding of technology. So finding the right product to be deployed is the most challenging part. That's my opinion in terms of deploying the digital journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great to hear about the challenges and also about the efficiencies that your firm has gained. And I suppose maybe we can open that to wider to the rest of the panel to talk about the efficiencies that their organisations bring. So I think I might start with Vlad. Okay, so what efficiencies do you think Revisto is bringing? What do you think what should be gained? I think you're on mute there.
Sorry. And I said I'll never make a mistake with muting and unmuting myself. I was saying, as you guys couldn't hear, that this panel is obviously about the wider BIM picture as well, not just about the collaborative part that Revista is obviously addressing. But I guess being in the industry, in software as a service for the industry for the last close to 15 years now, really, I've seen a lot of different use cases and a lot of different things and a lot of different transformations. So could you just remind me what the question was, Ross? Sorry.
So I'm looking to see what efficiencies do you think that Revista can bring to people?
So yeah, obviously, if we're talking about efficiencies in our particular part of that whole BIM process, which Revista provides in collaboration, I think there's numerous efficiencies. One of the biggest ones I'd say is the ability to, and this is what Alex was saying to an extent as well, to bring that whole BIM process to everyone, to the whole project team, and then you start really benefiting from the transparency and the collaborative process, because traditionally someone that's ultimately going to install something on site would first see the as approved shop drawings and go to install, and then go, oh, well, that's not going to really work, right? Whereas with something that now can universally be shared, and it's very user-friendly to people of pretty much any kind of technological background to non-technological background, pretty much, now brings that whole conversation to pretty much every single piece and part and member of a team that needs to see it. And ultimately, you don't know what you don't know, but the more people are exposed to it, then you get all those other people involved, and then they see something that they know that maybe no one else on the project knows. That ultimately brings efficiency when it comes to, delivering the project on site and putting everything together. That's one of the very, I guess, easy ones to think about. But I don't want to take the whole time just talking myself. So,
well, no, that's very magnanimous. I was wondering whether I could share the similar question to Eloise to ask, about the efficiencies that your organisation have been found.
Yeah, definitely. So just to come off the back of what Vlad said there, I think the key point is really about that collaboration. As a design and consultancy, I see BIM less about trying to get an efficiency for my company. It's not about trying to design a bridge in half a day instead of a month. It's about putting that same level of effort in, but getting a lot more out and making sure that you're cutting the total cost and time required for construction. So just as an example, over the last 2 years, I've been working on the High Speed Rail 2 project in the UK. So we've had 1,000 design staff working on an 80-kilometre section of rail. We've been 3D modelling tens of thousands of elements, providing 72 billion fields of data. We've got a team all around the world working on a CDA, and we're using automated tools to check and verify everything. So that's not just a more efficient way of working than 10 years ago, it's a completely different way. We could have designed that railway 10 years ago, but we wouldn't have been producing those 3D models and data-rich information that really reduces the risk, the cost, and the time for the contractor once they get to site. So that's where I see the efficiency, not for our individual organisation, but for the whole project and the industry.
Yeah, that's
not
good.
Sure if a contractor's got a view on that.
Yeah, I was actually going to pass that to Sean. I think maybe you'd like to touch on that if I can throw you out there.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just thinking there's probably just thinking about the methodology. So there's some efficiency, so we can definitely around the constructability stage of things there. So part of our DFMA approach that Langers just really focuses on, and one of the things we do really well is about that, is looking at the design and how do we make it more efficient for constructing on site. So there's probably 2 good examples I can throw straight out the way we've done that. So we do a process which is called a digital build methodology, where we look at what the reinforcement and how we're doing that. So we've been working with one of our partners, like with Atlas, doing that. And we've got some really good results at our Central Station project. We've been able to reduce costs and make more certainty around actually how we're going to go out and do the fixing and construction on site based off the reinforcement. Because there we've got some really technical sort of elements that we have to get there and do fabrication for, and it's making that assurance, like, you know, the bars are going to come to site. And actually it filters through everyone. So one, it filters through from design phase to the construction team, so they know what they've got to do so they can plan it properly. Our subcontractors then understand the methodology of their construction sequencing, so they can visualize and see what's going to happen. The shop drawings and that whole process all come from the models. So you have that, here's a 3D source, we can see it, we can do that federation with our services and our actual follow-on contractors or following interfaces. So we can do that whole coordination before we put stuff out there and then have to go out and diamond drill, so which is what we traditionally do in the construction. So we're removing all that sort of that risk, trying to get rid of that as best as can. And then you go right down through the actual then installation process for the people on site, so they can understand what they've got to do, which bar goes where and how. So all of a sudden you're taking all these like bits and pieces of time out. It's very similar to what Eloise was just saying there around doing the bridges and that sort of stuff. Yes, we probably could do a lot of the stuff beforehand, but the methodology's changed and the accessibility has changed. So it's really good in that sense. And then other ones we've been doing like stuff as well as like the parametric design. So like Alex has been working with some of our team. I know we do some of the grade separations. I know we have some talks down there in Victoria across projects. And they're doing a lot of stuff around like parametric design and how do we speed that process up, or optioneering and stuff like that, especially around that grade separation. You've got a lot of time constraints, especially with possessions or occupations, depending on what state you're on, what you call it, is how do you apply that, right? So that's, again, comes back to, it's like, how do you optimize your design? How do you then get there and tell people what you're going to be doing in that time frame? And especially in that occupation time, like you're talking about railway, and you've got a certain amount of time to actually do something. The client's not really keen to give you that railway until you can definitely demonstrate. I'm going to go out. Sorry, not me personally, but we as a group of people are going to go out, and we know from when we first start to when we finish, this is what we're going to do, and we can demonstrate to you in a virtual space and get that conversation happening. So then as you're going through and demonstrating as it's going through as well is a really important thing. So we've got a little, excuse me, some really good success stories of that sort of stuff. And then as well as also like using other technology like survey, like scan versus BIM. So those process using platforms like Cintu and that to actually start really looking at, as we're building it, how do we start doing that assurance piece and start getting that sign off as well. So bringing the client into that sort of operational space as well and start saying, yeah, this is what we've constructed. You can see that they can actually start using that platform as well. And we're starting to get that sort of data sign off as we're going along. So we're getting that progressive assurance, which is really important because, again, having worked on client side, the main thing that sort of they're interested in obviously is we want the asset as fast as possible because we make money from that. You don't make money from the construction phase of it, obviously. So the faster you get that handed over, and we know that the process, know what we're getting built is and what we're going to get delivered, and we can turn the key and it goes at the end of the day, is a key thing, right? So all those sort of efficiencies and success stories was sort of ticking off the boxes, really pushing the envelope or pushing us down the line where digital engineering or information management or that digital change is happening, which is really good. So there's sort of a couple of things where we've sort of gained some real good traction and really good initiatives going through the company.
I mean, you in your contracting role, you work with a diverse group of subcontractors and client bodies. How do you facilitate the adoption of BIM across that wide number of stakeholders? How do you approach that?
A lot of us are on the DE kickoff meetings or the digital engineering meetings. So the initial start off that, really understanding. So first point of call is, like you said, with the client, right? It's really understanding what they've asked for. So make sure we're open, having open conversations about what that means, right? So sometimes requirements can be written and they can be very, very broad. Let's be honest. There's digital engineering. Sometimes they write, just take slabs of stuff out. I mean, we want this. All right, the project is technically what we're doing is this here. So let's talk about it. So you can then refine what we're actually going to deliver, right? So we don't want to get there and you don't have to do everything about it. We want to get the best out of it for what we're going to achieve, right? So it's having an open conversation and making sure that what we're going to achieve is going to meet their goals. And then the flip side of that is that allows us then with our supply chain and also with our partners, so our designers like Arcadis and ACOM and stuff, that to really get there and go, right, we define what the digital engineering management plan is, with them what the actual deliverables are in terms of asset requirements or the metadata that needs to be inside the models, both for Langer Roar, because we have our own internal processes that we need to actually satisfy and we use the information for. As Vlad knows, because we've been talking about that sort of stuff with him as well, about how we index models and consume it in sort of a database process. But then also then allows us to then have that sort of collaborative approach, right? So we know that what we're requesting from our suppliers, our partners, is what we need, and also we can then know that we're going to supply that through to our client ultimately in a day, right? So that whole process it's really important to have that like open discussions at the start of the project. There's no point. Like you can do it later on. Like I'm not saying you can't then apply digital processes to a project that's existing, but you got to pick and choose your battles, right? Like with that there, you just can't go, we're going to do everything at once, because then it just doesn't work. That's going to tragically, I wish you like I'd probably take that challenge on, but it's definitely going to set you up for failure there, right? So it is really important to do that up front. So that's the conversation piece, and it's once you start having that dialogue, you'll find that a lot of people are really willing to come down that path.
No, that's interesting. And I was wondering if we touch on the hesitancy, because our sector is traditionally hesitant about adopting sophisticated digital solutions. Some of our consultants, we like go out pushing out there, but the higher the risk, the more of the barrier to entry on it, I suppose. And I was wondering, with your experience, Chris, whether or not how have you approached this hesitancy? How have you, the barrier to entry on this new technology? How have you approached, the reticence from trying? How did you?
Actually, I would say in a couple of words, make it easy for everyone. Try to do the workflow as much easier as possible, because we are dealing with a new technology and we have people that are not able to use it. I mean, not everybody is able to use it, and it's pretty difficult to find people able to deal with the different softwares. So whenever I need to perform a new workflow, I have to think about a medium or a low user. So I don't to think about this workflow is going to be used from a power user. That should be used from a new starter. Yeah? So that you need to think to make a tool that is able to make the task easy for everyone. And because the first thing that you notice when you are dealing for the first time with a new technology is that it's too difficult to use. It's different from the other one that you were using before, and the answer that everybody say to you is it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and I will use my previous technology because I have all my resources trained. So why I have to change? So to make it possible, you need really to think about, okay, just let's create a tool that can make this easier, and can make this easier not for me because probably I have the capability to use the software, but for a new starter. And once you get that objective, once you arrive to that, you won because basically nobody can say this technology cannot be adopted. So once you are able to place, just to give you an example, in one of our last projects, we had to deal with a precast element in a construction project, and the tolerance was 5 millimeters only. And you consider that when you have to deal with a barrier, in this particular project was a barrier along a curved wall. And depending on the radius of that curve, you are placing your barrier differently with an offset or not. And above all, above there, you need to place your railing. And your railing should match exactly with your barrier because the bolts for your posts are embedded in your barrier. And if you arrive on site and you place your barrier there, and when you arrive with your railing, the holes of the post are not matching with the barrier, you basically you made a mistake and you need to fix it. But if you can virtually model them in a virtual environment, you are really placing your barrier there. You are bending your rail depending on the radius, and you are able to calculate the exact length of the rail. So it's pretty impossible to arrive on site and say, oh, the rail is shorter just because we didn't consider the bandit. And that's something we can really do with Bim, and we couldn't do before just because we were using spreadsheets. We were using trigonometrical calculation and approximation. So we were making assumption and approximation in two-dimensional spaces from different views, but that basically we're bringing you to a result that was a kind of approximation. With BIM, we are not in that specific field. We are just going to a virtual space, and so we are really building our model as it is and as it will be. And if you are able to create a tool to get a new start and say, okay, you're going to place barriers here, you just need to use that tool, and that tool is pretty easy to use, you win.
I mean, it's lowering the risk for everybody involved because they have sight of all the coordinating elements. I'm going to take a question from our audience, and I was wondering, Eloise, whether you could answer this. This is from Ole Lope, and it is, what is the benefit of BIM for principals? Is there actually a minimum size of projects that makes investing in an integrated collaboration platform worth it?
Yeah, happy to take that question. And I think that's a really good one. And that's certainly one that, a lot of people in the industry are asking. It's all very well for your tier one consultancies and contractors to be doing this. But, what about smaller companies? What about for smaller projects? That kind of thing. Not everything is going to be a WestConnex or a Sydney Metro. I do think that BIM is applicable for every project. And the key thing is making sure that your tools and processes are scalable, so that you're still getting the benefit without, having something that's over required or assurance heavy. Stripping it back to what are the benefits that say a tool is going to bring your team, and how can it do the current process but better, whether that's more efficient, delivering more data, just improving the everyday life of your workers, what value, and making sure you implement that. So something as simple as a workflow in ProjectWise. Workflow is a fantastic way to automate and control a lot of information. If you've got an 8-step process to share a model, that might be well and good for a large project. But if you've only got a team of 5 working on it, they're not going to go through 8 steps to share a model. So you might say, okay, well, we still want to control that. Let's just do a 2-step process to say this model is work in progress or it's shared. So things like that, just looking at your software, your tools and your processes to say, how can we make this right for this size of project? Where can we just improve on what we were doing 5 or 10 years ago?
And with the manifest benefits of BIM, why isn't BIM mandated in infrastructure or office buildings? What are your thoughts on that, Eloise?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, and in my view, it actually is mandated in a lot of cases. So obviously, we're in a different situation in Australia from the UK. So the UK brought in its national BIM mandate in 2012 to be implemented by 2016. Obviously, you've got to consider they've got a different setup in there. In the UK, they've got a lot of national agencies like Highways England, whereas in Australia, obviously a lot of that is state-based. So we haven't had the federal government come in with a national BIM mandate. But we have seen those asset owners, which are a lot of time government organisations, developing them themselves. So Transport for New South Wales has their DE framework, and you do see that implemented on almost all their projects these days. And I think you'd struggle to find any large infrastructure projects these days that don't have BIM mandated. So whether that's WestConnex, Sydney Metro, things in Victoria, WA, as far back as Wagulga to Ballina, the Pacific Highway upgrade, that was all delivered with BIM requirements. I can't speak for buildings and office, but again, I think it just comes back to those asset owners and them bringing in those DE requirements, which we are seeing increasingly.
Thank you. Alex, I've got a question here from Roderick in Queensland, and it was how BIM transitions from construction into operation and maintenance. And I was wondering whether or not you could touch on that process or the benefits to the end user.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Obviously, where construction, if you implement the BIM properly, you will live from I call it the construction cycle or digital cycle from start to an end. So when you at the beginning, you have all those record what you design it for, and then you go through all these different phases of building it up. Obviously, along the way, you might or might not capture some of the mistakes you make, changes you make, especially the changes you make, you'll get captured for sure. So give you a good example with us in McConnell Dow, we have deployed a system, a drone survey system where you can track changes of the project site almost in a weekly basis. So that digital footprint will then eventually become, hopefully, that's what I'm hoping for, is become the asset owners part of the asset owners digital footprint. So from there, you can actually trace everything from start to an end. So as far as operations and maintenance concerned, you will have all this digital footprint with you, being a drone survey information, the beam models, all sorts of digital information. So greatly benefiting when you are, time for you to do the operation and maintenance, looking back at history, what have done, what have been sold and not.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's good. And do you? I was wondering, Sean, if you see any challenges in applying BIM to network infrastructure as opposed to buildings. I think it's down to a difference in that.
It's sort of. I think it's down to if you're caught saying. I think it's the term BIM is the problem. The word there. So like I think it was Christian sort of said it before. Was BIM? Or no, it might have been Vlad. I can't remember. Sorry, someone said before where BIM you normally traditionally first thing you think of is 3D, and that's the main thing. So straight away your brain goes, it needs to be all 3D, right? So say for example the corridor works we've been delivering for SSJ and SSC and stuff like that. All that's done in 3D. We've done all the work and that sort of stuff there, so we can actually do that coordination with the actual the CSR routes and then the fencing and all that sort of stuff in the routes, which is fantastic. But it's also down to actually really the staging and phasing. That's really important with that actual delivery of the works. Knowing where the CSR is in a geospatial or geocoordinate, like geospatial in the 3D world is important, 100%. But the real thing there is actually how are we going to get access to it and that sort of spacing. So like Alex said before, like with near maps and stuff that coming on board, and then you can actually use that to plan it, right? So with like those sort of infrastructure projects or that sort of stuff, that's actually where some of the key benefits come into it, is actually where you've got a little bit more of a greenfield. It's not like 100% brownfield in that. It's still stuff is existing infrastructure. You need to work around it. So there is those sort of clashes and coordinations. But it's actually then planning out how you're going to get access to it, especially in the corridor space, the rail corridor space, and how do you deliver that work. So that's one of those ones there. And before, like Eloise was saying about Highways England, if you look over there, like that sort of stuff there, they've done some heaps of work around how they deliver their linear infrastructure, especially the Highways England. Because when I was over there, previously working for Bam Little, we were doing a lot of work with that, and they were very keen on exactly. They had a kit of parts. They knew exactly what you wanted to use, and they were very specific around what you had to do to deliver their infrastructure and what the design was and all these attributes, right? So that sort of infrastructure work, no, I don't. There isn't really that sort of problem with actually using it during the just construction phase and that design phase and handover. So that, or the construction phase especially. I think where the moment where we're still obviously going down that path is really, and there's a question here that would be sort of touching on that one, is around the handing over for like your handover work, then using it for facilities management, where they keep on using that ongoing data, right? So I think there's some really good work's being done down in Victoria around that, around the actual utilities mapping and how they're doing that. So making sure now that as we go out and do the work, someone like Alex and McConnell Down do the work, we now capture it all in the same format, all the same metadata is getting done every single time around utilities. So which means that when it goes back to the utilities providers and stuff, that they're going to get the same data source every single time. And that means next time we pull that data back, next time around, that whole circular economy of reduction of waste and data, all of a sudden we're getting that information back. It's the same. So now we know that there's what we're asking for is what they're going to get back. And next time we go out and do work and say something, sit next area or someone else does the work, they know what they should be expecting. And then that then actually upgrades the data source, right? So say from utility space, it goes from type D, so literally like what's out there, dial before you dig. All of a sudden it starts upgrading that to getting more like a type B or a type, maybe some type A, and that sort of stuff, right? So all of a sudden all that utilities that's out there, we all of a sudden know where it is. We can rely on that data, rather than that sort of the tragic sort of thing that comes in contracts where it says, here's information, but it can't be relied upon. So then you're straight away out in that cycle of like, okay, go validate all information, go do all this sort of stuff, which is cost, right? And that's one of those things. So all of a sudden, all this sort of stuff here, to bring it back to your point, and that it's not, it shouldn't be seen it can't be applied. It should be applied to infrastructure projects. And definitely is being applied to especially long infrastructure projects. And the benefit, I think, as we're going along, we're inching along, but I think it's actually that we're getting more close to that point where it's going to fall off the edge, and it's going to be like, we need this, and we're going to be doing this, and this is where we're going to really see the benefits of it really happening, especially in Australia. So, sorry, a bit of a long-winded answer. But that's sort of just trying to sort of.
It's okay. There was lots of points there, but I think we can all see the benefits of a client body of the size of the infrastructure community. The national bodies. But are there? There's a question here that I want to get to, and I was thinking, for a company of the size of Langer Rock, I can see the benefits and I can see the challenges, and it's I can see how you get there, how you can spin up to be in there. But what sort of things can smaller contractors? What can they do to make the most out of BIM? Because that's a huge proportion of our industry, and so would anyone like to touch on that particularly? I mean, Sean or Alex, I think you're both nodding your head there.
Yeah, probably can chip in a little bit. Yeah, thank you, Sean. In a simple term, so give you a good example. I just recently in a webinar with a small contractor. So they are a survey company per se. It's a family business, and it's almost a one-man show when it comes to consuming the survey information. So he was saying to me that in the past, or even up to recently, within the project that we're working on, he's been bombarded with a lot of requests to do a survey setup for their site. And he used to get just 2D drawings, looking through all those, sometimes 2D models, had to do a few days of calculation and then plotting all those points before he import all this data into his core GIS devices and do his survey setup from them before everyone can come and build the job. Ever since he was very thankful that ever since that he received in this thing we call IFC models, so not issue for construction, we call it I think industrial federated class models. He was able to turn that information around within the same day rather than 2-3 days of calculation, where you can interrogate the model itself from all the corners that he was planning to set up his survey setup point for the construction. So as simple as that, just for a small contractor perspective, that you can take something like this on, get a 3D model, and you can look around. And if possible, like our organization is set up in a way where we allow subcontractor to come into environment to collaborate at the same time. And it's just a simple question asking if we have these kind of tools that they can communicate. And quite often, I think the mentality of the contractors and subcontractors is there's always a Chinese wall everywhere. But we have gone down the path of have removed that wall, and by all means just ask that question: have you got any BIM document that we can help them with? As simple as that.
Just off the back of that. 100% what Alex is saying there. And I think that's where we're seeing the most success in our industry, is where the larger companies are supporting smaller ones. Every time you're getting a subcontractor person or team in saying, use our systems, here's our training, this is the new way we're working. And then they can take that knowledge back and apply it to the next project, even if it's working with a different team or a different company, just bringing the whole industry up. And I do think that the larger companies are doing a good job in the larger projects of filtering down that training through the supply process. They're happy to be challenged on that.
I want to give a quick silly example. Before I give a quick silly example, just a not so silly example, I can tell you guys that our smallest client in Australia is a 6-people architectural office that has 10 registered licenses. So, they're a Revit shop, and they've been seeing value in doing BIM, not just modeling for themselves and then just issuing 2D drawings, but rather sharing what they do with their clients all the time. So much so that, although they're a very small practice, they even get more licenses than what they have people, just so they can share that BIM and basically promote the BIM process. The silly example I wanted to give, I think, can be transferred to what we call smaller contractors. It's my own example. I wanted to, during the first lockdown, like anyone else, redecorate my home office. So I was looking into someone building some shelves for me. It's not this office; it's the office in the previous house we lived in. And I got in touch with this bloke here from Melbourne, who does SketchUp models of the shelves that he does. So basically, I sent him 2D plans of my house and my office. He looked at that, built up a quick SketchUp model of my office with the measurements, sent it to me in SketchUp. I loaded it into Revista, invited him to Revista, and just started pinning things onto what I was thinking how those shelves should work, and taking photos and just pinning photos. And he was having that on his side and looking at it, and we just collaborate and communicate. And this is a project of no size when we talk about the actual industry. And both me and him see an enormous value in it. Because what was our potential alternative? Email each other, 100 emails back and forth, and having my thoughts lost in those emails to how he interprets them, and him building God knows what in the end. So I think even for the smallest contractors, there's an absolutely huge value in them adopting a BIM methodology and a BIM process, because it's simply a better way to do things than just basing them entirely on hard copy or soft copy 2D drawings and a bunch of emails. That makes sense.
Now, I love the fact that you've used it on your home office and you've found benefit on what would otherwise be a small project. I mean, I think that's fantastic. It's a lesson to everyone that we can take these out of all of our large companies and being able to use it on smaller things. And I think there'll be benefits to everybody. I mean, I want to try and think to the future, and I'm referring to a question here that we've got from Marcos, and it's like, what is the limitations of the technology at the moment? And I was wondering, Vlad, whether or not you might want to approach that.
Yeah. Obviously, we've got thousands of different technological solutions for, last I checked the official BIM documents online, there were some 118 recorded BIM uses, as we like to call them. That might have grown because I haven't checked that for the last couple of years. So I'm sure smart people in this have come up with more uses than 118 when last I checked that poll. But so it really depends on what we're looking at and what really what someone's trying to achieve. Obviously, I can talk firsthand around limitations in that collaborative aspect of BIM, and to an extent, connecting the models and the information from models to the whole teams. And I think, again, I don't want to make my talk Revista sales pitch, because that's not about that. But ultimately, we did bridge one big gap with performance by making Revista a tool that's installed on your computer and uses gaming technology, and basically provides this superb user experience regardless of the sizes of the models and even regardless of the patchiness of the internet connection you might have. So those are some challenges if you rely on online tools, for example, entirely. What if you're out on site and you're building a road and you don't have an internet connection, or your internet connection, you go down to the basement of the building you're building and you lose your internet connection because you're only doing 4G, 5G internet, you don't have like wireless installed and that kind of stuff, for example. That would be one. Another would be probably, to an extent, processing power. I think what we can see as certain limit is if you have a really humongous project and you want to load a lot of, say, laser scanned point clouds and share that with everyone, and a lot of design models that are modeled to tinier and tinier details with a lot of objects in them, then ultimately you need to have a pretty powerful machine to really still run it smoothly. So there's obviously all kinds of workarounds to that, but that would be probably one other kind of challenge that I can think of. And I'd be happy if someone else adds on to what I was just saying. So.
Well, Well, I think it's. I think at the moment we are very embedded for Revit ourselves, and definitely machine power is a challenge, and the size of the models it generates. So it's certainly the future, and it's you can see huge benefits in it. But I think the sharing of that information in a live space online, I think the size of the models for me would be a barrier to entry.
Yeah,
That's
actually,
the
I think one other.
if I
Sorry,
can
I'll
add
let Chris
just a
go.
couple
Sorry,
of, sorry about
I
that.
was actually going to steal
I
on
was
that.
actually thinking exactly that point, because everything is moving toward the cloud now in the last years, and we are going toward that direction. I'm pretty sure that all the metadata that we are writing into the model now, those metadata will be in cloud in a few months or a few years. It depends on how you want to deal with that, because we can do that. The technology is ready. We just need to perform and to create our platform connected to a cloud-based platform. And a good example of this was when I was in South America for another project. We tried to connect for a construction project our model with a database, with a cloud space database. And imagine all the data in a cloud space. The limitation was the internet connection. So was not the machine power anymore, but was the internet connection. If you don't have a good internet connection, or you don't have an internet connection like in the tunnel, we were trying to perform an application able to grab information regarding the segmental aligning damages, and that should be performed offline. And when you came up from the tunnel, you will be able to sync with the cloud. So everything will be shifted there, and there will be a point in which all this big data will be there, and you will need to really a really good connection, fast connection, to be able to deal with all those data. And another point is how what we will do with this data, with all we big data that we are pushing there. And there will be a point in which we will need to deal with them and to manipulate them and do something. So I would say the limitation are two: the power machines, that's really true now, but also the internet connection in I would say in the future.
Yeah. And I'm sure I heard some other voices who are interested in this. Eloise, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Yes, I think those points that have been raised are very real challenges about the hardware and sort of the solutions that you're using. I think another one is from a team perspective about software interoperability. So, it's a very real scenario where we might have a road design in open roads, drainage in 12D, road frontage design in Civil 3D, and structures in Revit. You're having 3 and 4 CDEs to allow all the teams to work on their models in the best environments. And teams are having to share 5, 6 file formats every Friday to try and share that. So it's not just about getting a shared model into a cloud. It's about making sure everyone's got the right formats they need. I think software is getting better, but I don't think like the open source formats are where we need them to be yet. And they haven't delivered on sort of what we promised. We can't just use IFCs as a single format between different designs. So yeah, I do think software solutions still have a way to go so that teams can just export one format and it's usable in all the different software platforms.
I believe from a tendering perspective in the UK on European projects, you need to deliver IFC files. Is that not right? Isn't that part of the contractual firms for governmental projects?
Yes. So I think yes, that is common in Europe, and I think even on our projects, most people require IFCs. The thing is, it's not just IFCs. You're needing to deliver a whole bunch of other formats as well to make the collaboration piece work. Everyone does it because we want to be able to collaborate, but yeah, it feels like IFCs, the software packages aren't using IFCs with what they're intended to be doing. So that's just my personal thoughts.
You're right. Still, that's the bit. If you talk about the original concept of what BIM was, or BIM was that open format process, right? So getting data exchange in a consistent manner between platforms, so that interoperability. And that's where that's still where the limitation sort of sits, because I was chuckling then because I just know about open roads and going into Navisworks and all that sort of stuff, right? Or just the AutoCAD Bentley process where data gets scrubbed and you're just like, okay, great. And then getting it to work and all that sort of stuff there, right? That is the key thing that's still we still have to get to as an industry, is like really drive that need is like, yes, we're not going away from different tools and stuff like that, but it's around that data sharing. So that sort of change of, maybe it's a bit of a, that sort of underlying thing of like, doesn't mean that just because it comes from a software package A goes to software package B into software package C to see it, doesn't mean we're not going to go away from all those software packages, but having that ability to use the best horse for the course, like horses for courses, is what we need to do, and having that interoperability and allowing us to move that data as quick as possible. Doesn't help us, like if you think about we're the small part of the actual infrastructure lifecycle, right? So you're talking about, when you talk about the actual end product and that's the stuff, that's actually where it's all expensive, right? Because then maintenance cycles and the whole sort of cycle of like predictive maintenance and stuff that happens, and you can go delve into that, and that's the stuff. And that's where actually the big benefit comes into it all of a sudden. If you've got all that data and it's easy to consume by different platforms and we're not restricted by that sort of stuff, all of a sudden all these opportunities, and that's where that bigger cost sort of factor comes into it, right? So I agree with Eloise on that one. Is that interoperability bit is we still have to chip away at that and get that down pat.
And what maturity level do you think we are in at the moment in our industry? Because we as consultants and the contractors are consuming three-dimensional models and sharing data, but everything that we do is based on the scopes that we have, and everything that we do is based on the tender documentation that's presented, which is normally founded on two-dimensional paper drawings. Do you think that we will be getting to a point where we'll be delivering three-dimensional models rather than drawings as tender documents for construction information? Is that something that we think is going to be happening soon? Or what are your thoughts on that? And I'll throw it out to the panel to see what anyone wants to say. I see Christian's nodding his head there. I was wondering.
Yeah, actually, I think that's happening now. When I arrived here in Australia last year, I started working for Transport for New South Wales, and they got a good framework that you need to follow strictly. That's based on the ISO 1965, 6650, on the PAS of coming from Europe. So that's really good, and we have a lot of rules to follow. That's pretty easy. As long as you know the rule, that's easy. And I'm pretty sure that in the next few years, all the tenders will have this kind of mandatory requirement, not only the 2D but the 3D model. And above all, in the requirement for the digital engineering, we don't have to deliver the DWG during the project, but just at the end of the process at 100%. So during the project, we have to deliver the model only and the drawings in PDF. And that's a game changer. I mean, that's really different from what we were doing before. And we have been doing that in the last year when I arrived. So in 3 different projects in which I have been involved with, that's mandatory. So we are not dealing with only drawings anymore. We are dealing with models, and we will need to deliver federated model, clash free, and we are already in that area. One point that I would like to touch regarding this is in another previous experience in Metro Bogota, we did a tender 3 years ago, and that tender was requiring the adoption of BIM 100% for every kind of discipline, and above all, the payment would have been done looking at the model, not at the spreadsheet. So your model should have been used for checking which element would have been already built, and if that was built, you would have received your payment. So that's a really different point of view compared to our traditional spreadsheet saying that, okay, done, and just make an invoice. And that was mandatory. And that was really strange to me to see that kind of requirement in that moment, because we were talking it was like 2017, 18, and that was really an early stage. But yeah, I think that's already happening.
Is anyone else seeing that happening in their companies?
We are getting a lot of like the tender models. We are getting a lot of information coming from tenderers on especially transport jobs, like Chris just said. So we are getting that information coming across. I think the big change will be is the reliance on the model. So that is what I mean by that is taking that the term of it's for information purposes. I think that's the change that we have to get to. We are getting 3D information and stuff like that, but it's still that reliant on the industry of like the 2D documentation is what you shall use. So, which is nuts because like sort of certain things, like you said before, like especially the transport stuff, there it says all 2D documents must be derived from the 3D model. For example, that's actually a line in the EIR, right? So you have to say how you're going to meet that. So I think it's getting to that point where it's actually, yes, everything is within reason. Like obviously, let's be honest, I'm not talking about modeling nuts and bolts and down to like all the different certain things and stuff there's a whole scope of LODs, and we're not going to talk about that because that's obviously a topic for another sort of session, but where we need to go down to that. But I think it's down to that. It's like, what's your reliance on the information? If we can actually get to the point where we're actually doing that, and there's a couple of questions here about like then how does this tick over to infrastructure, like maintenance and stuff like that, and reusing of the work and stuff like that. I think once we start getting to that stage where we're actually using the information, we're taking that forward, we're updating it from there, and we've got that consistent common data environment or methodology of how we actually share that information as well. Like, so instead of getting here's 50 gig worth of data, you just sort of get it, and then you got to consume it, and that's the structure. So all that's the stuff. Once that gets streamlined out, and there's actually a consistent approach about here's information that's been used, we get access to the client space for that sort of work. We can then do it in our space and then push that back. All those they sort of sound quite trivial, but they're quite big steps still to sort of achieve that ultimate goal of that sort of. When you actually originally asked us, I was thinking like BIM level 1, BIM level 2, BIM level 3. So how old I am right there. But so going back to sort of there, right? And that's sort of that utopian dream of BIM level 3, where we're all working in a space where we're sharing information and consuming it from different stages of the project lifecycle, and then uploading, like going through that process, right? So I agree with Christian. Yeah, it's definitely there. Some of it we're getting information. It's definitely moving in the right direction. It's the reliance on the information and moving towards it. Yes, we can then use this information as a valid data source, and we can go from there. And then from there is then actually reusing or giving that information back in that format for the following works to happen. Is that sort of stuff there, right? So that's how so we can keep on doing that work. So I think it's all definitely going in that direction. And you're right, like the transports and the Victoria DE framework and stuff. Some of the stuff that's coming out is really good around what their ambitions are. Probably the only thing that's highlighted about Australia and COVID is that we're states, not one constant thing. So if we all got the same consistent approach across all the states, it'd make all our lives a lot easier. But let's not go that one either. But it's definitely going that direction, in my opinion, anyway.
No, that's very good. Eloise, we've got a question here, and I think you might like to approach this. And I find this question itself quite an interesting one from my own point of view. It's from Zulena Wahed, and they say it obviously benefits most to contractors in the near future on different phases of the project. But how does it benefit us in an early phase of the project? So I assume that they're referring to designers. So how does it benefit a designer rather than a contractor? Because the use of the benefits to contractors seem clear.
Yep, no problem. So a couple of the points that I touched on right at the start of the webinar, but having a common data environment allows much larger teams in different geographic areas to work on your projects. Having those federated models means that we're picking up coordination issues. Having these management plans and DE support stuff, it means that we're putting digital solutions at the core of our projects. and it means we can change the way we work, and the teams have the support to actually make sure they're successful with that. So those are some of the ways. I suppose for me, that's just looking at the design team by itself, how it can improve your life as a designer, but also making sure our projects are more successful. For me, someone posed a question to me, how many contractors need to pick up errors and emissions when they get to site? But the fact isn't about when they get to site. That's not the only issue. If you're starting piling on a Monday morning, but you pick up an issue the previous Friday, you're not on site yet, but that's still an issue because it's going to delay piling. The real thing is, when is the critical path delayed, and how can we address that and de-risk it? And the best time to do that is earlier on in the project. So like Sean mentioned earlier, BIM and digital engineering solutions allow us to collaborate more early on, so you can more quickly do optioneering, more quickly get input as a whole team, not just designers, but contractors and other stakeholders as well. We can get more confidence earlier on in the project so that we're not getting changes, errors, and emissions later on, which are delaying that critical path. So I think there are benefits to design teams by themselves, but the greatest benefits are going to be to that whole project, picking up those coordination issues much earlier.
There's one other topic there too. Is like there's a couple of questions here with that, like that benefits, like earlier on, is around GIS and the consumption of that, like an application of the tools to best sit. So, sorry, we've got question stuff that I'm reading at the same time, right? But it's like, if you can imagine there, like take the borehole logs and utility services and stuff like that. If you can quickly see that, and especially in a 2D, like sort of GIS consumption, right? You're talking about people being able to access tools and use stuff really quickly. Everyone uses Google Earth, or everyone's used Google Maps. That's a GIS. So as soon as you actually start putting that information in a GIS in front of people and projects, they straight away they can pick that up really quick. It's amazing how fast they can actually then consume that data. And doing that, like that sort of stuff, so certain data sets lend themselves specifically very early, if you're talking about pre-feasibility or concept stage design around those sort of things, they lend themselves so well to that sort of data consumption and how you can actually see that. As soon as you can map that information and see it, you can straight away see there's holes in the data. There might be stuff there that needs to be validated, so you can straight away identify that and then start updating your data source based off that. So that's sort of, it's the application of the tools and the processes that's going to get that benefit out of it, right? So like land acquisition, for example, and stuff like that. If you're talking about infrastructure projects at the pre-feasibility stage, like how many properties is this impacting? What sort of impact does it have? How many do we have to procure that? And what sort of, like, length of procurement? All those sort of things all of a sudden come into it, right? So it's how do you get that from sort of someone drawing something a bit of a plan and not quite getting that and understanding that, to having a live data set that's actually live from the cadastre, geospatial, geotechnical stuff, all that sort of stuff, consuming it, so you can get that real life data from multiple data sources and you're making that decision on the right data source. So just sort of thinking about that as well, is like, what are you trying to achieve at that early stage and how you best apply those tools to keep pushing that forward. Sorry.
No, it's a great addition. I'm actually going to take it to the other end of the project, and I'm going to ask Alex. This is from a gentleman called Ian in Western Australia, and he says, have you used BIM for inspection, maintenance, repair, and how can that rich level of data be added into the BIM models? And I wonder whether you'd be able to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can certainly add to that. So I think the question is, what is Ian's concept of BIM? So that would I would ask him, what's his concept of BIM? In my opinion, BIM is a digital footprint where you can trace back to. So it doesn't have to be 3D models. It doesn't have to be 2D drawings. It can be pictures. It can be videos. It can be a drawing that someone sketches on the tissue paper. You scan it in, and this form part of digital footprint. And I see that as part of the BIM system ecosystem. So in this case, maintenance and inspection, perfect topic because I'm a drone pilot. So imagining you are doing inspection of a cell tower, you will be capturing pictures, you'll be capturing videos, and the drone nowadays is smart enough to fly autonomously with AI built in. So every time when you deploy a mission, you will be looking at the same set of information all the time, every time, just different time interval. time lag feature, for example. That's another very great example for maintenance and operations, how it was built, what goes where, and how it was installed. So that's another great example. Solar power industry, they uses this technology, the thermal sensing technology, where they just fly around the site autonomously again, captures all this information. So the answer is, how do you capture them and then make sure it's usable in the future? So quite often when I talk to my pilots, I'm a chief remote pilot, so when I talk to my pilots, I'll say to them, imagination, the sky is the limit. That's what I say to them. So BIM, essentially, I'll call them, you can say it's a digital footprint. So here you go. So this is answer for you. As simple as something like this, you can store digitally, scroll it back, share it, collaborate, measure from it. And from, in my opinion, and that is a really good use case for operation and maintenance perspective.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. And touching on that, because if we take the life cycle from the start to the end of the project, I was wondering whether, and this is an open question to the panel, how do you see the future of digital engineering within the sector, and what do you see is coming down the pipeline? Maybe we go to Vlad first, but and see what you might want to say to that.
Yeah, the future. We mainly see the very bright future, to be honest, because the efficiencies that more and more BIM projects globally are bringing just can't be ignored even by the smallest contractors, as we were just talking. So we see more and more adoption, more and more people opening up, and more people not just waiting for government mandates or even client mandates for them to deploy BIM methodologies, but rather having, as we can see, pretty much all the participants here today, their companies have taken the approach early on, saying, well, this is something that we need to do and develop, otherwise we'll just be behind in a few years' time or sooner. When it comes to the technology itself, I think one of the bigger things that we see developing in short to mid term is more of an augmented reality and immersive reality technologies. I know that there's already a lot of solutions out there that claim they're doing augmented reality and so on and so forth. I can't state anything from my own experience because I haven't really used it or tried it. I know there's still certain technological challenges to make that work really, really smoothly and seamlessly. Again, going back to that proper, smooth end user experience so that people embrace it, not just, as Alex was saying before, throw it away and say, it's not working. I tried for 3 minutes and it just didn't work for me, which is normally what you get with guys on site. If it ain't working for 3 minutes, that's it. I've made up my mind that this is never going to work for me. So it's got to have that first impression. That's pretty awesome. So I personally think there'll be a lot of more investment into immersive and augmented reality. And, I'm happy to be contradicted and for some of the guys on call to say that they already have some brand new awesome tool that's really perfect doing augmented reality. But I think there's still a bit to go in the technological and hardware sense to make that really super easy and accurate and usable for people ultimately on site.
Thank you, Vlad.
I
was wondering, Eloise, what you'd like to...
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, go on, Alex. Go for it, please.
Yeah, as far as augmented reality is concerned, the technology is there. We got, I guess, not selling any company. The triple site vision, for example, been working quite well on our side. And you're right. Vlad, you say technology is not quite there yet, but it's just up to a BIM person or digital engineers to make it work. And any digital engineering for per se had its own challenges. So it's up to us to overcome the challenges. So how do we deal with the models that are coming into the devices? So we're talking about just a simple mobile phone to be able to house the data processing and hosting the information in the reality. So it's always up to ourselves to make it look easy so that the downstream consumers just go, right, okay, this thing works, and we'll just take this one step at a time, and what else can we use it for? So That technology is certainly there already. And with the virtual reality, yes, I'm on you on that 100%. It's still a big challenge to trying to make it work, and especially the workflow of capturing information, putting everything together, and be able to host it on the virtual reality environment, which I'm about to do a demonstration tomorrow, and hopefully it's going to go well. But rest assured, it's a very, very challenging task to get done.
Yeah, very good. Eloise, I was wondering when you'd touch on this question.
Yeah, look, I agree with what both Vlad and Alex have said. I think the future is bright for digital engineering. I think we're going to continue to see client requirements increase, and that the whole industry is going to have to respond by continuing to work in smarter ways, including using more advanced tools. I think that increased requirement is going to continue until asset owners are using our models and our data to operate and manage all of their assets. So still a while to go, but yeah, excited to see where we go in the next few years.
That's good. I'm going to pass this to Christian to see whether or not you have any closing thoughts on the future that you see in the industry.
Yeah, I agree with everybody. Actually, it's pretty bright. And just to give another point of view, because just to avoid to repeat all the same things, talking about a most remote future, because the near future could be like use our model for maintenance, for all the stuff because the technology is there, already prepared. We just need to use that. But if we think about a more remote future, I'm seeing our models using for everything, for buying a T-shirt in a shop. So just think about the metaverse. Think about it, Facebook even changed the name. Think about that. So we are now we used to buy things on Amazon just with our mobile. Think about putting your eyes and get into the shop, going down and up and see all the stuff and say, okay, I'm gonna buy this. And it's another kind of experience that you can have in a more, probably not so far from now, but probably the technology is not totally ready to do that. Probably there's still something to do, but we will get there, I'm pretty sure. And once we will get there, all this kind of conversation will be normal conversation that you can have in a bar, because that's arrived. And that's just to give another point of view, just to say something different. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And Sean, I'm going to come to you last because you're the contractor in the room, and it's always good to the contractor the last word. So I was wondering whether you have any final thoughts on the future of digital engineering.
So we're actually working. This sounds a bit weird. I'm working to do myself out of a job, to be totally honest, because it's sort of some of the processes we want to see is this, and I'm actually passionate about this myself. I'm actually true about this. Is that a lot of the stuff we're doing now should be businesses, like it is business as usual, but I want to see it actually become that sort of, we do this job to make our lives better, right? So, and we're enabling people to do that. So it comes with like that, coming back to the supply chain and stuff like that. And it sort of touches on Chris's stuff and Alex's and Vlad's and Eloise, touches on all those bits and pieces where it's really the real benefit around digital, and the bit that will help us do this and really drive this is the bottom line of like, we need to make 7%. Our supply chain needs to make 7%. We want to make sure our industry is healthy, right? Like that's the main thing about this, right? So the more ways we can actually get there and make sure we're providing the right information at the right time, people know what they've got to do at the right time, and it's easy to get access to that information. The supply chain knows what systems they've got to do, what records they've got to do, what data they have to produce, how they've got to do it, and then the client themselves knows what they're going to get back or what they're going to provide to us as well as like the contractors and designers. All that then makes our lives easier, right? So that's one of the things that for me, it's like that's what's still really exciting about doing all this stuff is actually how do we make this make our lives better? So we're working less, we're doing more. Like we technically, yes, we can produce more content. We're using the technology to make our lives a lot better and stuff like that. And we're making sure that we're getting that real work-life balance and we're getting the best out of it. So and we're going home knowing that we've made the money that we're meant to make, right? So From a contractor point of view, that's where, like for me, and where we're driving to is making sure we know that, right? So all the stuff's defined, our requirements are set up right, not just around just like what's in the 3D model, but I mean like all the data we have to capture, who's going to do it when and how, so that we can just constantly go through and we know what was very clear about that, right? So, and that's the stuff there. So like that's why at the moment I'm doing my master's in artificial intelligence, because I believe that there's some stuff in there that will unpack that specifically around that. It's like how do you delve into that 50 gig of data you get dumped with and build that straight up there instead of rushing to do like 8 weeks tenders and stuff like that. And how do you really get there and consume that in the best way possible, and then make sure we're making the valid decisions and stuff like that. So yeah, there's some real exciting stuff personally that's coming up that will enable us to do that, like do some really good stuff in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I certainly have enjoyed the conversation, and I certainly also learnt a lot from different people's perspectives on this. So that's been fantastic. But sadly, that is all we've got time for today. So I hope I'll ask the audience to join me and thank everybody on this call. That's Vlad, Eloise, Sean, Alex, and Christian for their time and insights that they've shared with us today. I'd also like to thank Engineers Australia industry partner Revisto for making our webinar possible. We'd appreciate your feedback on the program today to help us improve and plan future sessions. Please complete a short feedback form, which is linked in the description box below. Engineers Australia would like to advise nominations for the Engineers Australian Excellence Awards, Peoples and Projects. The nomination website with further information is linked in the description box with today's feedback survey. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.